And the four-way, I got it. Every week we're going to be doing the four-way test, and every week we have somebody read the four-way test, and it's not every week. We have a past RI director at a meeting, whether in person or Zoom. So Vicki, can I ask you to read the four-way test for us?
Absolutely, I would be honored. Thank you, President Steve. So Rotary's four-way test, the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. And if you'll please join me. First, is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you. Thank you, Vicki. Next, our pledge. Mohsen, I thought, are you on, Mohsen, by chance? I didn't see you. So, Jim Crane, can I ask that you step in and do the pledge today?
Okay. Let's put our hands on our heart, over our heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, there we go. Oh, thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. And now for the thought of the day, Past President Chris, would you give us your thought of the day?
In this crazy time that we live in, I'd like to remind everybody that character counts and that to do the right thing is always the right time to do it. So I have a couple of comments about that. Character is not only doing the right thing when no one is looking, it's doing the right thing when everyone is looking. It's being willing to do the right thing even when it costs more than you want to pay. Character is the moral strength to do the right thing, even when it costs more than what you want to pay. It's a little redundant, but I wanted to say it. This is what Martin Luther King said. The time is always right to do what is right. And Mark Twain, do the right thing, it will gratify some and astonish the rest. Another final quote, real integrity is doing the right, knowing that nobody's going to know whether you did it or not. As Rotarians, we do the right thing always.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Okay, next, Past President Ed will lead us in a song. And it says, The Mouse That Roared. That's actually the topic of our speech today from our speaker. But Ed thought, you know what, the little mouse roared. So 3 blind mice, I believe, right, Ed?
I thought it would be a nice to sing a song which was one of my favorites when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, and a nursery song. And again, it's in keeping with the topic, The Mouse That Roared, and it's 3 blind mice. 3 blind mice. 3 blind mice. See how they run. See how they run. They all ran over the farmer's wife. She cut off their tails with a carving knife. Did you ever see such a sight in your life as 3 blind mice? Thank you.
Hello, I'm back. All right. Anyway, and thank you. Our windmill rider today is Past President Tom Barron. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for writing it today. Our visiting Rotarians. We do have visiting Rotarians. And Peter, would you like to introduce our very special visiting Rotarian today?
Yes, my pleasure to have with us Rotarian Sanford Smith from the Glen Allen Rotary Club in Northern California, near our wine country.
And
Thank
our
you.
past RI director, Peter.
And also past RI director and past International Fellowship of Flying Rotarians Section Chief for Southern California, Vicki Bullis.
Thank you very much. Thank you for Sanford for coming on our Zoom today as our speaker, and thank you very much, Vicki, for joining us. And just to remind everyone, Vicki will be our speaker next Thursday, 31st of August, and that will be at Hillel at UCLA. So we're all very much looking forward to hearing Vicki speak to the club next Thursday. I heard her spoke at the Melbourne convention back in late May, and excellent program. It was the Big West breakfast, so it was an awesome morning to get up real early. Let me tell you, it was fun morning. Anyway, moving on, announcements. The district picnic is this Saturday, 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. You can sign up at the District 5280 website. Tuesday the 29th, update information. We're sold out. We've sold all our tickets. Mark, would you care to share just briefly with those on the phone who are going to the game or on the Zoom, for those who are going to the game, what the process will be to get their tickets?
Very simple. Later today, I'm going to send everybody that bought tickets. I don't have everybody's email, but Chris, I don't have your son's email, but everybody who bought tickets will get an email from me that explains two things. First of all, your ticket, everything is electronic. Dodger Stadium does not accept cash anywhere for any reason. So you need a QR code for your ticket. We have those. Those are being sent to you by text or by email. So you'll have those to flash at the getting into the ballpark. The second thing is that I'm on the phone. I'm on the Zoom right now. Can we hold it down back there? Yes. Second thing is that you need to go to Dodger Stadium online and get a parking pass. Every car has to have a parking pass coming into the stadium. So that's about it. I'm looking forward to it. Very excited that week. I'll be at the game 3 times that week, but looking forward to seeing all my fellow Rotarians there.
Outstanding. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun, Mark. Thanks for organizing it. Really appreciate it. Should be a great evening at the ballpark. Next, on the 9th of September, and I mentioned this last week, and I really would like it to be an opportunity for us to make donations to Camp Pendleton. It's for the benefit of families, newborns down at the camp, and as many of you may know, and actually, Taya, can you share the flyer from it? You all should have received this from the district. It's an opportunity for us to provide. What does it say? July 22nd. Anyway, this information is not the. I think I sent the wrong flyer to Taya to put here. It's actually September 9th. It's at the. We will take the items over to the fire station in Beverly Hills, one of their fire stations, donating items. Information here about what the donated items will be or can be. So what I ask people to do, and already past President Marcia has graciously given a gift to us. Or for the children down at Camp Pendleton. So bring what you see here, diapers and baby supplies. It could be even gently used items. And so what I'm hoping to do next Thursday, the 31st, and then the Thursday after that, the 7th, is collect items, and then maybe a couple of us can take it over there on Saturday morning to the fire station. It's a program that the district has done for a number of years, and many of us have already made donations. And this is just an easy way for us to make donations, gather them up, bring them to the meeting. I'll put them in the back of the car and I'll run them over there on the 9th of September. Again, I apologize for the date here. I think I just sent the wrong flyer to Taya. All right, go back to the announcements. Then Peter and Shirley will be hosting a spouses event at their home. We're actually getting together this evening to talk about planning the date and all that. October 14th will be this wine sip and see up at Chris and Rose Gaynor's home, Saturday, October 14th. Everyone will bring a bottle of wine and a nice appetizer. Should be a wonderful evening. And another update, so, Sunday, November 19th, our 2023 Foundation celebration, Marina Marriott Hotel, dinner tickets $175. We got 2 tables and we're sold out. We got, actually the whole event sold out too. But the 2 tables that we purchased is Westwood Village Rotary. We have 20 people going. It's gonna be a wonderful evening. If anyone's interested, let me know. And there is a waiting list, and we'll see if we can get you on that waiting list and get you into the event. So anyway, there will be raffle tickets available, as well as or I should say opportunity tickets. If anybody wants me to explain the difference between an opportunity ticket and a raffle ticket, take me aside next week and I'll tell you. But anyway, they're $100 for a book of 12. And we've always been a club that donates a lot to the raffle tickets. Last year, it was over $7,000. I think it was $7,100. Gordon says he wants to get $7,200 this year. So we'll see. I'm sure we'll hit that mark like we have in the past. All right, moving on here. There's the flyer again. Oh, we have to always do what's today. August 24th is National Waffles Day. And Ted, go to the 2 pages back, next page. And when okay, there it is, guys. That's Marcia's, my wife's, really, really good waffle recipe. So I'll send this around. I'll tell you, she makes the best waffles. Actually, the pancakes are pretty darn good too. And I'm not a big pancake, waffle, French toast kind of guy. I'd rather have eggs and bacon or something like that. But I'll tell you, this recipe is really good. So I'll send it around. I think the secret is the buttermilk. Anyway, so today is National Waffle Day. Here's a wonderful recipe to take advantage of it. So anyway, on this day, 79, Mount Vesuvius erupted, which buried Pompeii and other cities. Thousands died. Recent research has said that maybe it wasn't on August 24th. It might have been after October 15th, but it's still kind of the accepted date. But some are now challenging what the true date was. 1891, Thomas Edison patented the motion picture camera. Only one of over 1,000 patents that gentleman invented or applied for. Amelia Earhart flew across the U.S., left Los Angeles, and arrived in Newark. She left on the 25th, arrived on the 26th, because it was a 17-hour nonstop flight, 1932. People born on this day: Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia was born in Farmington, West Virginia. Baseball player Cal Ripken Jr., Baseball Hall of Famer, and besides just being a great player, played for the Baltimore Orioles, he had 2,632 consecutive games. Nobody's come close to that. That's over 16 years where he played every game. He was born in Havre de Grace, Maryland, which is outside of Baltimore. Actress Marlee Matlin was born in 1965 in Morton Grove, Illinois, and she was the only deaf performer. Actually, I think somebody might have won something at the most recent Academy.
Yeah, they did.
Who was
Best
deaf.
actor.
Yes, so I guess this is no longer true. But anyway, she's a marvelous actor. She won for the Children of a Lesser God in 1987. People who passed on this day: Henry Kaiser, the industrialist. He helped build the Hoover Dam, the San Francisco Oakland Bay Bridge. Kaiser shipbuilders built a lot of the Victory ships used during World War II. You know, we all know about Kaiser Permanente. He started that because he wanted his employees to have quality health care. He set up the first HMO. So he was born in 1882 and passed away in 1976. A remarkable man who lived most of his time in California. He was born, I think, in New York, but lived most of his life in California. English actor and director Sir Richard, I think Richard's misspelled, Richard Attenborough, and the movie that most people remember that he directed was Gandhi. And in 2020, American author and journalist Gail Sheehy died. Her book in the 70s called Passages really was almost like it provided a lot of information about the aging process of adults, what people go through, will be going through in their 20s, 30s, 40s, all the way up to their 80s and 90s. So it was a bestseller back in 1976. So, okay, moving on here. There's that recipe. I need to see if somebody's on the Zoom. And I will, oh, I thought she was going to be on. I don't see Marcia Hunt. Marcia, you here? All right. Well, I'll tell you guys what I'm doing. As you know, in the past, we've done Rotarian of the Month. When I was down in Melbourne, and if you can click it one more time, Paya, on the Zoom. And I've already presented this pin to President Chris, past President Chris Bradford. I didn't want to do Rotarian of the Month. I want to do something a little different. I found these pins, and I really like these pins a lot. And it's just an opportunity for me on a ad hoc basis, not with, every month I do it. Maybe I'll do 2 a month, or maybe I won't do any a month. But the point is, I wanted to make a presentation again. And the person I was going to present to is past President Marcia Hunt. As we all know, Marcia does so much. She's our, besides being our own peace chair for Westwood Village, she's the district co-peace chair. We know of her history in Uganda, doing great humanitarian work in Uganda, building schools and being the, sponsoring many of the students in Uganda. And now she's actively involved in Ukraine. And she's involved in on October 28th, we're going to have a peace walk in down in mid city center part of Los Angeles, down near Adams. And in a couple of weeks, in fact, I wanted to give this to Taya. Can you go off of the Zoom for a second, or off of the PowerPoint just for a second? This is what I have here, and I'll present more for it. And I was hoping that maybe Marcia can share a few moments about it. It's going to be a Zoom on September 16th. I hope you can see this. And it's between a district in India, District 3192, and our district. And it's a program in the morning. They'll be Zooming in at night. Never know why India is on the half hour, but it is 8 o'clock, 8:30. Anyway, it's going to be a great program. I hope many of us can participate on this Saturday morning. Marcia will share more information about it. So anyway, but I wanted to make that presentation of the Above and Beyond pin to Marcia because of the things that Marcia Hunt does for the club, for our district, and for RI in general. She's just a remarkable Rotarian. And I wanted to make that presentation of the pin to her today because she wasn't going to be there next week. I was hoping to do it next week, but she's not going to be there. So anyway, here's the pin for Marcia. And the next time she's there in person, that's what we're going to do. Let's not tell her though. Let's surprise her. So nobody tell Marcia. Okay. Thank you. Anyway, back to the Zoom. There we go. And well, we're running a little bit early. What I'd like to do before we introduce our speaker, Diane Good, could you share with everybody where you and I went yesterday and things that you and I participated in, whether it was the young gentleman doing the district grant, talking with Jen Levy, talking with Bruce Rosen about a golf tournament, and even when he talks about the music or about the music program at the VA. Can you spend a few minutes and maybe share some thoughts with everybody?
Certainly, I'm happy to, Steve, although the golf tournament's kind of more in your area since you spoke mostly to Bruce about that.
Okay.
So yesterday, as many of you may recall, last Rotary year, we gave a grant to the Brentwood Middle School for their special ed class to rehab computers to donate to the VA. And yesterday we had the ceremony where the computers were brought over by the young man who did the rehab work And we celebrated him, actually. It was really a very nice event, very well done. Thank you to the club who provided the treats and the iced tea for the event. And he showed us the computers, and now he wants to go back and build like 15 more for the VA. So he's very, he's a Rotarian without being a Rotarian. But he did agree that he would go back to Brentwood. He's now in high school, his very first year. He's going to go back and ask about setting up an Interact Club. So we're very excited because he's really quite a young man dedicated to doing good in his community. Steve?
Yeah, Diane, could you share maybe a couple of comments about, maybe Bruce shared a few, maybe it's more for a conversation with you and Carol, but maybe you can just kind of share a little bit about the potential music program up there at the VA.
So as you know, again, most of you know, we have been trying to set up a Music Men's Mind band on the VA campus. And Bruce has been collecting instruments, and he has a lot of instruments that veterans are interested in playing. And so we're aiming towards September, a weekend in September, to have our first get together to see how many people are interested. And Bruce was thinking that not necessarily our club, but he was thinking if he had a golf tournament on the same day, it might be a good draw to bring veterans to the golf course and to the instruments. But he's very much on board with getting this band set up. Very much on board.
Right. And then in talking with Bruce and also Rick, I think his name is, he's actually one of the bandinis. They're very interested in us coming up and using the facility to have a golf course, a golf tournament maybe, or even coming up and playing. I think maybe the first go around would be maybe if a group of us just after Rotary, let's say, or at some point, go up and just play the course. I mean, it's a 9-hole repar. I picked up one of these silly little cards. I shouldn't call them silly. But anyway, showing kind of the layout of the course. I mean, it looks very nice. It looks like it's well maintained. It looks like a lot of fun. And we might be able to do some kind of a golf tournament. One of my goals this year is to see if we can do a little fundraising for our foundation, for our Avenues of Service projects. And so I'm thinking possible golf tournament might be really right in line with what might work. The greens fees up there are very reasonable. It's during for vets it's free. For everyone else during the week, I think it was like $20. What we're thinking, Diane and I were just kind of talking between the two of us, that maybe what we would do is we would each maybe who play, and maybe for those who don't even play, sponsor a vet by having the vet come up and be participating. Again, the vets don't cost anything, but they'd be there for the lunch and the fellowship that would follow after the golf tournament. So it's something I think would be a lot of fun. It might be a way for us to raise some funds and have a great afternoon and a lot of fun up at the golf course. But the first step is maybe just a group of us, maybe 5 or 10 of us, just want to play golf for an afternoon, just see how it is. It looks like a lot of fun. And lastly, we met with Jan Levy. Jan was on a Zoom. I actually didn't hear the Zoom. I was out of town. But I was told by Diane and others that it was a wonderful Zoom, wonderful meeting. And Jan is with City Green Farms. She has a facility right next to the golf course, right really in the parking lot of the golf course. And they have a victory garden for the vets. They're growing vegetables using the most breakthrough technology, soilless technology. And it was fascinating to see her operation at work. So it might be something for us to revisit, literally, go up and check it out. Maybe when we go up to play golf, we'll coordinate with Jen and really get a chance to see how this operation works. It was fascinating to see that her state-of-the-art equipment. She took a shipping container and has all fitted out to where she's growing literally hundreds and hundreds of plants in there. Primarily, the vegetables were primarily lettuce, small leaf vegetables. It can't at this point accommodate heavier vegetables like tomatoes or zucchinis or eggplants. but just to see the operation and to hear her speak, how eloquent and knowledgeable she is about it, and how we can do projects with her. They have these towers where you grow vegetables in this tower. It circulates water through it. It could be, we're trying to envision where we go with this year's district designated grant. It could be that we work with just an example, with Union, for instance, in installing one of these towers. They've already been installed at other locations, such as Beverly Hills High, Santa Monica, I think she said. So we might be able to do something over at Uni High. It's a fascinating technology, everybody. So anyway, it was a very interesting afternoon. I really appreciate Diane inviting me to join her when we made the presentation of the certificate, as well as seeing the golf course. I've heard about this golf course. I just never seen it before. And I was very impressed by the little operation. So anyway, that's it for me on yesterday's sojourn. So I think at this point, we're right on schedule, and I'd like to ask past President Peter Moore to introduce our speaker for today, Sanford Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, President Steve. I'm pleased to have our friend Sanford Smith with us today. The subject of his presentation is The Mouse That Roared. It's not the movie, but it's about one small Rotary Club was able to accomplish to change the rules of admission for women as members of local Rotary clubs and Rotary International. And here's a bit about Sanford. Education was at Harvard Law School and UCLA. Left UCLA to become a deputy county counsel for Los Angeles County, specializing in school law. That is, representing various Los Angeles County school districts and others. Subsequently, went into practice in sole practice, representing 5 school districts, including Duarte Unified School District. Returned to his home in Wyoming after the death of his father to take over the family ranching and mineral leasing business, and was there from 1989 to 1997. Came to Northern California in 1997 and have been there ever since. He served on his local water district board 2 terms, served on the board as president of the Travelers Century Club for 40 years. He has been a member of Rotary since 1972, first in Arcadia, California, then in Jackson Hole, Green River, and Rock Springs, Wyoming. And he was a past president there. And he is currently a member of the Glen Allen Kenwood Rotary Club in Northern California. His interests includes amateur radio, travel, both foreign and domestic, photography, and collecting various things. And it's a pleasure to welcome Sanford Smith. Please give him a warm Westwood Village welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be able to speak to you today from, I guess, a somewhat cooler Northern California, although it's quite humid, unusually humid. Anyway, as a member of the County Council's office in Los Angeles, one of my clients was the Duarte School District. I handled a lot of civil rights cases for them because Duarte, as in many Southern California communities, was a very racially segregated community, substantial African population, substantial Hispanic population, and also a Anglo population. The superintendent of schools for Duarte when I was there was Dr. Dick Key. And Dick Key also happened to be the president of the Duarte Rotary Club. I was a member of Arcadia's Rotary Club, which is just about 6 miles or so down the road. Arcadia's club with 125 members, mainline Rotary Club, if ever you've seen one. And Duarte, on the other hand, had about 15 members at that point. And it used to be basically a club at which you could make up, but we never took it very seriously. However, about 1977 or so, we began to hear rumors that Duarte had admitted 3 women as members of the club. And at that point, Rotary International and Rotary clubs did not allow any women members. I found that with the passage of 35 years, many people find that rather extraordinary, and they can never believe that there was a time when Rotary did not have women members. But I assure you, in the 1970s and earlier, they most certainly did not have women members. Anyway, at the 25th anniversary dinner for the Duarte Rotary Club in December of 1977, the local district governor, who was from Pasadena, was introduced to the 3 women who had become members of the Duarte Rotary Club. The district governor that year was a gentleman who was a mortician, and he came originally from Mississippi. Duarte in 1952 had its introduction into Rotary, and at that point it had a number of members who were Black, which in 1952 was highly unusual. Our district governor from Pasadena, from Mississippi, was one of these gentlemen who found it impossible to words beginning with N correctly. And he was extremely aggrieved by the fact that Duarte had Black members, but there's nothing he could do about that. However, when Duarte really punched him in the face by having female members, that was a cause that he could take to finally show what his true colors were. And so essentially he squealed to Evanston, Illinois, Rotary's headquarters, about the fact that Duarte was not conforming to the Constitution bylaws of Rotary International, and that something needed to be done about this. Well, at this point, the Duarte Club had had these 3 women members for close to a year. So Rotary International said to Duarte, you have a choice. You can either get rid of your women members, or we are going to boot you out of Rotary. Well, the members of the Duarte Club were not exactly what you would think of as liberals. Duarte was represented by H.L. Richardson, who was a member of the John Burt Society, as was Arcadia. And the membership was quite conservative, to say the least. A number of the members were retired missionaries from China who had been booted out by the communists and now lived in a retirement facility in Duarte. Membership was really a very, very conservative makeup, even more conservative than you would think of with most Rotary clubs. However, at that point, they had worked with these 3 women members for over a year. They were accustomed to their presence. They felt very comfortable with them, and they would be damned if they were going to be told by anybody in Evanston, Illinois, that these 3 women members were not Rotarians as far as the Duarteans were concerned in every respect. So they voted unanimously to retain their women members, and if that meant the being expelled from Rotary International, well, so be it. They were given the opportunity to appeal the decision of the board to the convention, which that year was held in Tokyo, Japan. And Dick Day had been succeeded as the president of the Duarte Club by Luke McJimson, who was the principal of the Duarte High School, and who incidentally was Black and a charter member of the Duarte Rotary Club. The appeal to the convention in Rotary produced what you would expect from the results, and by a substantial majority, the membership at large of Rotary International voted to back the decision of the board and expel the Duarte Rotary Club. So at that point, our only recourse was to go to court. Originally, I was the sole attorney for Duarte. I brought in the ACLU to represent the 3 women members because we felt there was a potential for a conflict of interest between the 3 women and the club itself. It turned out that we had no problems with that whatsoever, but in order to be ultra safe about the matter, we did bring in the ACLU. Original trial was held before Max Deutsch, Superior Court judge for Los Angeles, who incidentally was a good friend of mine and had been my judge on a different case, Johnson versus Inglewood Unified School District, which is particularly important to your president, because that was the first case in the United States in which a busing order had been abandoned. And Max Deutsch caught absolute hell for his decision there. I got more calls than I can ever recollect from attorneys. It was decided on a Friday afternoon. By Friday night, my phone was ringing off the hook. And I probably met up with 20 or 30 attorneys, all of whom had rather strong Southern accents and saying, how in the world did you manage to get rid of busing in Inglewood School District? And I basically said, well, you take a district that's 50-50 minority and Anglo, and you translate it into a district that is 90% minority and 10% Anglo, and busing makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And the people who testified to that effect were the school board members, 2 of the 5 of whom were Black, and one of them happened to be from Ladera Heights, which at that point was probably the last Anglo bastion left in Inglewood. So Max, when he got this second case that I threw in his lap, basically said to me in private, after the hell I went through on Janelle Johnson's case, I'm not about to decide in her favor. The settlement court judge, who was an ex-attorney for the ACLU, who had been raised to join the bench, basically told Deutsch that there's no way in the world that you are going to win this case. On the other hand, when you looked at the legal situation, there was at that point no case in United States history in which people in a similar circumstance to Duarte had been backed. The closest we had was a case called Roberts versus JC's, which was decided actually in 1982 or 83, I believe it was. But when we went through the trial court situation, we had absolutely no precedent to back our position that women were entitled to become members of Rotary. And so Max decided against us in the trial court. But we put on a good case and we appealed it to the Court of Appeals in California. And they unanimously said, no, the women in Duarte had every right to become members of Rotary Club. And indeed, under the Unruh Civil Rights Act, the Duarte Rotary Club was required to admit them as members if they met all other qualifications, which they certainly did. The Supreme Court of California looked at the record and decided that the Rotary International had absolutely no grounds for appeal on the situation, so they did not even grant them a hearing on the matter, and they approved the decision of the Court of Appeals. So at that point, the state of the law, now we're talking about the early 80s, was that as far as California was concerned, Rotary clubs had to admit women members, but of course that decision had absolutely no impact anywhere outside of California. Rotary International, probably against their better judgment, decided to appeal it to the United States Supreme Court. A big mistake, because that meant that the decision that the US Supreme Court made on the case would have an impact across the whole of the United States. We're now talking 10 years into this situation. We argued the case before the Supreme Court in March of 1987. And one thing I want to mention, after Duarte was expelled from Rotary International, the members of the club said, we're Rotarians, we've been Rotarians for years. We wish to continue as if we were a full-fledged Rotary Club. We may no longer be good for makeups for people in the locality, but we are going to continue to do our work of service as Rotarians under the name of the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. And indeed, they took the Rotary pen, they got it made up with a huge X across it, an ex-Rotary Club of Duarte written on the pen. Same thing with the banners. And in every respect, they continue to operate as if they were a Rotary Club. And people who felt well about the situation would continue to make up there, even though it no longer counted for attendance purposes. When we went to the Supreme Court, we decided strategically that we would have an attorney from the Attorney General's office, a deputy from the Attorney General's office, and one of the members of the ACLU, both of whom were female, to argue the case before the Supreme Court. And as we walked in there, we see Rotary International's attorneys, about half a dozen white men, well on in years, versus our side of the court, which had probably 4 female attorneys, I think 3 male attorneys, some of us fairly young. At that point, I was in my 30s. And it was a visual picture of what had happened to the nation in the period from early 70s to the late 80s. And indeed, the reason why Duarte admitted women to begin with was that their community was a typical suburban community, fed most of the business and professional mavens of the community into either working in Los Angeles or working in Pasadena. And if you looked at who was available to be a Rotarian in Duarte, about 65% of the pool from which Rotary could draw its members was female, and only 35 to 40% was male. So it was a very logical decision for Duarte to make, to carry out its responsibilities as a Rotary Club at the same time as carrying out its responsibilities to have members who were the leaders of the business and professional community in Duarte itself. When we argued the case, we had prepared for this with moot courts, both in Los Angeles and in Washington area at most of the local law schools. I actually argued the case for Rotary International in the moot court competitions, because of course we weren't arguing against true attorneys for RI. And it was a wonderful experience. One of the arguments that never was raised, which I thought would have been one of the strongest, was the situation between Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. I was rather amazed that that issue was never raised by Rotary International. They did talk a great deal about their concept of freedom of association. And my rejoinder to that was, well, the members of the Duarte Rotary Club are the ones who really need to talk about freedom of association. And they have indicated repeatedly that their idea about freedom of association is that they wish to associate with female peers and not be members of a racially exclusive organization. When we left before the Supreme Court, we only argued the case before 7 justices. Blackmun and Sandra Day O'Connor both recused themselves, one because she was married to a Rotarian, the other because he was a Rotarian. We didn't realize at the time that Justice Powell was also a Rotarian, but if 3 of the Supreme Court justices recused themselves, they couldn't hear the case. They did not have a quorum with the 6 justices who were left. So Powell did not recuse himself, and indeed he was the one who wrote the decision. After we left the Supreme Court and we appear on the steps, and it was, I think, a very wet day, and I get 20 microphones stuck in my face. And I said, you know, normally when you argue a case before California Supreme Court or federal Supreme Court, you don't really know what the decision is going to be. You may have an underlying gut feeling about how well you did, but you don't really know. In this case, the only question in my mind from hearing how the justices questioned us was how many were going to vote in favor of upholding the California Supreme Court decision. And indeed, when the decision was made only 6 weeks later, which for the US Supreme Court is miraculously expeditious, it was a unanimous 7-0 decision. All of the justices joined in with Scalia having a separate opinion supporting the majority of the Supreme Court. And the argument was basically that the Unruh Civil Rights Act required that Rotary, as a business establishment, admit women under the same conditions as they would admit any male applicant. Then the question became, how do you carry out this decision? And Rotary International's board basically said, well, the decision now applies to all of the United States. There's nothing we can do to force Rotary clubs in any part of the United States to not admit women members. And at that point already, there was quite a number of clubs who, even before the decision, had admitted women. One of my most interesting cases involved the Seattle International Club, where we had as their first woman who was admitted a woman whose father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had all been Rotarians. In her generation, there were no males. So her father had said, well, you know, I believe that my daughter is as qualified as any of the previous generations in my family to be a Rotarian. And he was the one who sponsored his daughter into the Seattle International Club, and they accepted her. Also an interesting situation, person who started out representing Rotary International had been an applicant to join the LA5 club and had been turned down because LA5 had an abundance of attorneys. They didn't want another attorney. His wife was the conductor of the Santa Monica Symphony Orchestra, and she was admitted to the Santa Monica Club before the decision was made by the Supreme Court. So he had a very personal stake in this situation, and might have been a bit bent out of shape that they considered that his wife was more qualified to be a Rotarian than he was. But we got along actually extraordinarily well, and it was easy to deal with him. Some of the other attorneys from Rotary International were not so easy to deal with. One of the questions that I have had to deal with, which I found particularly interesting, was how did Rotary International cope with Duarte continuing to function as a Rotary club, even if it was no longer in RI? And I think the situation was that the members of the Duarte Club always took their position as Rotarians, even if it was ex-Rotarians, extremely seriously. They conducted their club business scrupulously according to Rotary's rules. They continued to provide service to the community, and they never did anything to antagonize RI simply because they had a rule with which they disagreed. And I think that RI respected that, and therefore, when it came time to, carry out the decision, RI had no problem with readmitting the Duarte Rotary Club. As for clubs outside the United States, basically the board said, if you live in a jurisdiction where legally they're going to come to the same decision about the right of women to become members of the local clubs, then there is nothing we can do or will do to stop you from admitting women as members. If you live in an area where the law forbids this, the national law or the local law, or culturally, it's a situation where this is totally inappropriate, then you'll be allowed to continue to maintain a ban on female membership. And the example they would always raise is Saudi Arabia, where women could not be integrated into the general society in any way, shape, or manner. However, there's a little problem with that. Saudi Arabia does not have any Rotary clubs, and as far as I know, has never had a Rotary club. So just because women can't be members of Rotary in Saudi Arabia is irrelevant, because men can't be members of Rotary clubs in Saudi Arabia, since there are no Rotary clubs in Saudi Arabia. The toughest road we've had to hoe internationally was actually two countries. Australia, where there seems to be a particularly strange feeling that men have towards their position in society vis-a-vis females, despite the fact that obviously women in Australia have done a great deal to become members of the business and professional class. The other place was England, which has always been under a separate set of rules right from the beginning. And in the case of England, basically what they decided was that no Rotary club that was existing in England would be required to have female members, but that any Rotary club that came into existence after the decision was made would be required to consider females under the same qualifications as any male applicant to join that club. So I've talked about this in many, many countries. In Japan, where they don't seem to have a problem with women who are qualified being members, although I understand it is not particularly easy for foreign women Rotarians to make up at Japanese Rotary clubs. I've talked about it in some of the smaller countries in Latin America, India, South Africa, and in Europe, and all across the United States. Perhaps my most interesting situation was talking about this at the invitation of the Chapel Hill, North Carolina Rotary Club, whose president was a man named Roland Giddis, who was the editor of a publication called Accept Women as Rotary Equals. And he invited me to speak to his club. He said his club was not in favor of having women members. I show up at the meeting and there are 20 sheriff's cars lined up on the street outside the meeting. And I walk in and there are a whole back of the meeting hall was sheriff's deputies. Now, the vision of a group of rather well on in years male Rotarians being so aggrieved at having a speaker who did not say what they wanted him to say, and therefore causing a riot, which of course I'd be the one who would be arrested as the instigator of it, was a rather a surreal experience. I think well appropriate to the mouse that roared picture of who is it who calls the shots. But that was the closest I ever came to causing a riot, even in clubs in some countries like Paraguay, for instance, which you would not consider to be particularly liberal, were very considerate, and I never had a problem with any of the places where I spoke. aside from Chapel Hill. And even there, they did not riot against what I had to say. Basically, that is how it came to be that women joined Rotary International. And looking back now, 36 years after the Supreme Court decision, it is difficult to imagine Rotary without women members. I'd love to hear any comments or questions that you may have for me.
Any questions for Steve Shearer?
That's a wonderful talk, Sanford. And I remember in our Westwood Village Rotary Club putting this issue to a vote after a club assembly, and it was a remarkable time. And I was much younger then as well. And my question is, you referred to a thread of argument that was not used, and it had to do with the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. And I wondered if you could just briefly talk about that more.
It's somewhat tangential, but you look at people who are in that age category, and as we're finding out, for instance, in the integration of schools, formerly sexually segregated private schools mostly, basically females who are of a particular age, say it's 12, are much more mature than 12-year-old males. This is obviously disappears the older you get, but it is certainly a very real factor if you're in education that not all sixth graders are alike. And in general, female sixth graders are much more socialized and much more mature than male sixth graders. Interestingly, I graduated from high school when I was 16 years old, and I graduated from a sexually segregated private school. And certainly looking at my classmates, even as opposed to myself, it was quite a difference in our level of maturity. But I came from a situation where, in our area, basically you became an adult when you were 13 or 14 years old. And at that point, anything else was sort of gravy in terms of education and perhaps taking you out of the labor force when you should be working. So the argument about integrating female and male scouting programs, I think, had a great deal more sense in terms of the reality of the way the population is. But when you're dealing with mature adults, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Tom Barron.
Sanford, I was curious. That was your description of the whole event is very interesting. Is there anything written up about an article or some other feature that we could access to hear, to get a more accurate view of some of the events? I'm writing the windmill today, and I want to make sure I got everything right.
I don't know for sure. Sylvia Whitlock, who was mentioned earlier, has approached me about her desire to write up an account of what happened. She was not one of the original 3 members, but was the 4th female member of the Duarte Rotary Club. And I don't know whether she has written up an article or not. I've shared most of my materials with her, and I've done other things aside from this case, and this is certainly an important case to me, but I have never really considered that I should sit down and write it up myself. But certainly is a bit different because of the nature of the people who are in the Duarte Club. Normally, when you're dealing with civil rights club, you sort of got the stereotypical view that it is a bunch of women battering down the door demanding to be Rotarians, which absolutely was not the case in Duarte. If anything, Duarte is made it very easy because it was males saying it is our desire to associate with female peers. We feel comfortable about it. We feel that it's actually vital to our community. And it's not at all a situation that it is a traditional civil rights type of case. Interestingly enough, also, one of the noted feminist attorneys in LA wanted to become involved in the case, wanted even to submit an amicus brief on the case. And I sort of guided her off in a different direction. And I said, I don't think that it's going to help the situation, because I knew how she was going to approach it, and it just was going to ring all of the wrong bells.
Well, it's now 1 o'clock, and our meeting will come to a conclusion. Sanford, excellent program. Thank you so much for speaking to the Westwood Village Rotary Club today. Awesome. Sanford referenced Shirley. If you go on our Windmill, there's a link to her presentation to a Rotary Club up in the Bay Area, the Silicon Valley. Very, very interesting as well. Really a very strong history of what Rotary is all about. The fact that it was long past time for women to become members of Rotary. And so thank you for all the hard work you did, Sanford. Our speaker next week, who happens to be joining us today, past RI Zone Director Vicki Pulitz, will be our speaker next week, and we're all looking forward to seeing you in person, Vicki.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it as well. Thank you.
And I will talk with you tomorrow about 1 o'clock. Will that work? Okay, thank you. And a quote from Marlee Matlin, and it's this is what Marlee said: "I live my life like everyone else. Everyone has their own obstacles. Mine just happens to be deafness." With that, everybody, thank you for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you all next week at Hillel at UCLA. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Sanford. Have a good
Thank
drive.
you, Sanford.
Sanford, where'd you go to high school?
Excuse me?
Where did you go to high school? I grew up in Pasadena.
Hotchkiss in Connecticut. I went under a program called ABC. I'm originally from a reservation in Utah. And at that point, ABC, for people who lived on my reservation, there was no public high school. We had to go to BIA boarding school. But the state would agree to, since all of us had to be boarders anyway, they would send us to any boarding school in the country that would take us and pay the bill as if we were public school students. So I got to go to Hotchkiss under ABC.
Great presentation. Thank you.